Back again for the 2026 Dynasty Dummies Rookie Hootenanny. JMic is here. I am here. We are getting ready to talk the second six wide receivers. Doesn't mean that they are the second six in our rankings necessarily, but the second six that we're going to discuss on the program, which means that we will have talked through 12 running backs and 12 wide receivers in the last 4 weeks, which means that we are getting steadily closer to the audience participation portion of the program, where you tell us the players that you want to hear about, and we go scramble around and watch them and try to give you a little bit of a fleshed out opinion of those players, so you have a handle on some of the sleepers, some of the darlings, some of the people either that you're hearing about or that you've seen and want to know more, because we are a podcast of the people, for the people. We want you, our faithful listeners who we appreciate, to benefit from this show, this interaction, this community, this relationship. And it really is a relationship. And so if we can do things that help you out, the better off we all are. But for this week, it's another 6 wide receivers and a fun group, I think, JMic.
A fun group indeed. We're looking at some players who won national championship. We're looking at some players who have been ballyhooed about since their Devi days. And we're even looking at players who really came out of nowhere to quite possibly score pretty highly for us from a film grade perspective, Zach. Tonight might be a little bit shocking to the system for many. Zach and I have obviously dove into the tape. We've got film grades for these 6 guys. And just to even set the stage before we even get into Zach's musings, just so people have an understanding of who we're talking about this evening, we're talking about the likes of Antonia Williams out of Clemson. We'll talk through the pair of Hoosier champions, Omar Cooper Jr. and Elijah Sarratt. We will also get into Zachariah Branch out of Georgia, formerly of USC. A lot of transfers today, Zach, that we'll talk through.
Yeah, the portal be busy.
We'll get to Germie Bernard out of Alabama, and we'll also get to Chris Brazzell, the second out of Tennessee. Excited to be back with you, Zach. Thank you again to our friends over at Fantasy Cares who continue to keep the lights on for your boys. Look at us, Zach. We don't have to worry about staying in any bathtubs or locking ourselves away in stalls waiting for the next week. We've graduated.
I've come a long way from sleeping on the floor in the kitchen of the open bar, you know.
We'll leave the light on for you. It's good to be here with you, Zach. Before we even go any further, man, I know musing time. There's always something on your mind. There's been a lot of news, a lot of pro days, a lot of life happening. What do you have for us?
So this was a fun one. The other day after I finished watching Zachariah Branch, and you mentioned Zachariah Branch is one of the players we're going to be talking about, I posted a reminder to all my league mates: the fastest wide receivers ever at the combine are Xavier Worthy, John Ross, Henry Ruggs, Marquise Goodwin, Tyquan Thornton, J.J. Nelson, Jacoby Ford, Darius Hayward-Bay, Velus Jones, Paris Campbell, Andy Isabella, and Curtis Samuel being the slowest at 4.31 in the 40. Zachariah Branch ran a 4.35, so he's probably terrible because he's so fast, and definitely stay away from him in rookie drafts.
Please.
Yeah, and so it was tongue-in-cheek, and I got a little bit of pushback from people who didn't realize that I was being sarcastic, but it also got me into an interesting conversation where the relative importance for predicting NFL success chart got posted, where it is all the combine drills and all the positions, where wide receiver is just a black hole all the way across. So there's no predictiveness to any of the drills. And to me, I think you can explain that away by saying that wide receiver is just too broad a category. And because wide receivers win in such different ways, and there are 4 or 5 distinct archetypes of wide receivers, that the predictiveness of each drill it doesn't stick, because some guys are winning with speed, some guys are winning with quickness, some guys are winning with vertical separation, some guys are winning with route running. So there are all of these different ways to win and different positions, where you've got guys who are strictly slot, you've got guys who are X, you've got guys who are Z, you've got guys who can kind of slide in and do both. And so I had kind of posted that theory, and then our friend Tommy Blair, who is at FF Tommy B over on the Blue Sky app, who's a brilliant analyst, a numbers but don't hold that against him. We appreciate the numbers, guys, because that means we don't have to do math. And he is over one half of the tremendous Superflex Super Show. So he comes in and said that this is where we diverge, because he thinks that it is important for the NFL, but he does the NB10 score. And if you follow Tommy at all, he kind of tracks and predicts what will be successful at the wide receiver position, and tries to have a top 10 headed into a year where he's targeting those players, because he wants to be loaded for bear at wide receiver, so he can allocate slots on your roster to running backs. So he wants to be very, very top heavy at wide receiver. I agree with that philosophy. But he's saying it doesn't matter the archetype, because he can figure out who's going to be successful during the season. Awesome. That's incredibly helpful. It's beautiful. It's part of the reason why I am an avid follower of Tommy's. But my response to that is, that's awesome. But I think that if I know what archetype wide receiver is popping in the NB10 score, I can use that to cast a better net when I'm doing rookie analysis, because I think the NFL, just like at running back, the NFL at wide receiver kind of shifts, and we go from the small, fast slot receivers earning high targets kind of over the middle when defenses are bigger, to when defenses shift smaller, the X type who can vertically separate and kind of be a bully. And so understanding what Tommy is predicting for the NFL players who are already in the NFL, to me, is really important or beneficial to us as analysts. It's kind of like when we used to use Peter Howard's numbers to back check, because guys with numbers, and I think this may be the real important part of all of this for you listening, the guys with numbers can do this really cool thing where they can scrape data, and I always liken it to fishing. They can throw out this gill net and trawl it behind, and they can catch 250, 300, 350, 400 players and analyze all of those players with the numbers. It doesn't work that way for film, because we're spending so much time on each individual player. We're line fishing, and so we want to catch the biggest, best fish we can, because we don't have the ability to go catch at the volume. And so it's important to understand the value of what metrics analysts can do and the analysis with the numbers, and then how it can be used as a filter and a back check for us. I'm always happy when we come out with a list of players that we have ranked, and the numbers analysts match up with that, because that means that what happened, which is the numbers, lines up with how it happened, which is what we're seeing. And then then you get this really beautiful story when they don't line up, I mean, look, I'll be honest, I'm still going to break ties to what we do, but I appreciate the value in what the guys over there do. So it was an interesting conversation. It was great to disagree with Tommy a little bit, because I find that when I'm talking to people that I agree with, I don't always learn very much.
Mhm.
And so it's fun for me to get that feedback, that pushback, make me think, and hopefully we can come up with something valuable. Stay tuned, because we'll be efforting that.
I think it feels really good when we get the opportunities to have those kind of candid conversations about what we're seeing, what we're noticing, what our processes are bringing us to. Um, and Zach, you've consistently done a very good job of this, of understanding that just because I have a perspective does not necessarily make it the gospel truth.
Sure.
It tells me what I see and what I'm able to ascertain with the information in front of me, but it does not give me the complete picture of who someone is, or what their profile says or points to in reference to their future success or lack thereof. So I'm always intrigued by folks who are able to help refine our processes and almost act as a checks and balance system for us. So shout out to the guy, Tommy B. Tommy Blair is good people, man. That dude is it's good people.
Absolutely.
Very good people. Okay, Zach. If no other musings, I think it's important for us to be able to jump into our actual time to talk through these players. We've got a 6 here. By the end of the night, we'll have 12 that we've scouted from a wide receiver standpoint. And I'm gonna just say it right now, Zach. I kind of like this wide receiver class.
It's not as bad as build. It's not as bad as build. This class really reminds me of 2022.
Yeah.
It really does. And 2022, we got Garrett Wilson, we got Chris Olave, we got Drake London. Brees Hall was up at the top of the class. Ken Walker has been fantastic. Still hasn't caught the passes that everyone was telling me he was going to. He's been great.
Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah,
Zach.
amazing. Like, again, the best runner in the class. We had that conversation. The best runner in the class. Still to this day.
We did.
But yeah, like, this class really reminds me of 2022, where it's not a good class, but just because it's not a good class does not mean there aren't good players. There will be good players. And I think we're going to talk about a couple of them today.
We are. Let's just get right to it, Zach. The first things first, we're going to be talking about the life and times of one Antonia Williams, the redshirt junior of Clemson, 5'11", 187. And when I went back to look for a little bit of background on him, Zach, 2024 was really the year where he popped off something fierce. And he actually led the ACC in receiving touchdowns that year with 11 touchdowns, which was really cool to be able to go back and see. Came on the scene as a freshman in 2022, 14 games played as a freshman, which that's outstanding. 56 catches for 604 yards and 4 touchdowns. If you're going to have a freshman campaign, you might as well have an amazing one. He earned freshman All-American honors that year. And then fast forwarding to that 2024 season that I just laid out, after a down sophomore season where he only played in 5 games, he comes back with 75 catches, 904 yards, and those 11 touchdowns that I had mentioned previously, but also 7 rushing attempts for 101 yards in the score there. Then we finally get to this final season, again, for Clemson, 55 catches, 604 yards, 4 touchdowns, for a Clemson team that was scuffling from the word go this season. Lots of disappointment. Cade Klubnik wasn't exactly the quarterback that everyone had billed him to be, and Clemson was an overall disappointment. But Antonia Williams you could find him just about all over this offense, Zach, doing positive things. What do you say about Antonia Williams?
Blockbuster. Walkmans. Fried McDonald's apple pies. Oh, big Clemson wide receivers. It was a good run, but eventually all things go the way of Crystal Pepsi. But fortunately, Antonia Williams is here to usher in the era of mid-sized Clemson slot receivers. I'm here for it. Zones fear Antonia Williams. He picks them apart with quickness and precision, finding throwing lanes for his quarterback and sitting down. Williams also has a knack for getting zone defenders in motion before he attacks them, often causing confusion as to who is supposed to be covering him. So he gets right to that pass-off zone and has one defender coming to him, the other passing him off, and then he'll kind of sit in no man's land. And it's really a beautiful thing to watch. At the stem of his route, Williams separates with really quick breaking cuts, forcing the corner to leverage himself before attacking. And we talked a little bit about that last week, but getting a defender to commit to one side, getting his weight going, his inertia going one way, and then cutting back, because a defender, by definition, is on the defensive. He has to react. And so if you can get them reacting before you've actually made a cut, like Antonia Williams does, you can separate. And with the ball, Antonia Williams adds extra yards with quickness and really good open field vision. It's fun to watch him after the catch.
Yeah, and for a guy who lives in the slot, I think that it's great to be able to see him run the entire route tree. That was one of the interesting things about how Clemson was using him. While he has short area quickness that I think is pretty strong, and even though he does the whole wave him home thing when he turns, I'm not gonna hold that against him too strongly, because what he's able to do, especially on screens, and being a smooth chainer of moves together to be able to free himself in many instances for plays. One of the most interesting pieces, Zach, was that they used him everywhere: in the slot, out of the backfield, wildcat quarterback, double pass from motion. He's effective everywhere. And consistently, I think that he was showing really positive hands and confident hands in catching the football. While not an impact blocker, he's very aggressive when it comes to blocking. And one of the things I know that you and I talked about before, in that when you're blocking, hey, don't turn around and look for the running back, just block and let the runner do its thing. He actually does a really good job of getting after people in that sense. When we're talking about some of those drawbacks or those weaknesses for Antonia Williams, Zach, what do you have for him?
Well, I think man coverage is where things break down a little bit for Williams. He does not deal with physicality well, and a stronger corner can completely derail his route running. Although Williams rarely is at a disadvantage when it comes to quickness, I think sometimes he doesn't go anywhere with it. And that's kind of what you're talking about. He moves his feet quickly in place. He does pinwheel that arm, but without an attack, that tempo and quickness is wasted.
Yep.
I think at the next level, Williams' lack of size and inability to win consistently versus man coverage probably locks him into that slot role. While he's very talented from that secondary receiver slot, it's going to take a perfect landing spot to make him a consistent contributor for fantasy purposes. But man, I can see a path to Antonia Williams being a high volume slot receiver on a team. Like, he has that talent. I really enjoyed his film. He was a player who really surprised me, where, you know, this being a down class and him being a slot receiver, you kind of are like, okay, is there anything here? Yes, there is. There's something.
Yeah, and Zach, you pointed out a couple of the things that were paramount, at least in my eyes, for some of his drawbacks. Defenders can get hands on him and reroute him pretty often, and it's just disappointing to be able to see, especially with the dexterity that I feel like he shows with the ball in his hand, that he doesn't have a stronger play strength in that sense. We talked about the wave him home, and then also what I had mentioned here and that you mentioned, while quick, he's not sudden when navigating start-stop. And I think that speaks to the whole what you're seeing in terms of not necessarily going anywhere and not being able or not consistently breaking plays far more open than the opportunity does present itself for him too, especially with all the ways he's getting the ball.
Yeah, it's so I'm always watching movement kind of cross sport. And with especially with slot receivers, there's a very point guard, like you like to see the crossover, you like to see the hesitation. It's almost the same as a point guard in basketball. And the real important piece of all of that movement is that you get going in multiple directions. So when you attack, you're attacking both horizontally and vertically, because if you attack in one direction, a defender only has to catch up in one direction.
Mm-hmm.
But if you attack both, so if you're attacking on a diagonal, if you make that move and then attack vertically and horizontally at the same time,
yep,
a defender now has to account for two different directions to make up. And I think that's where you see him just kind of do the hesitation dribble, but not attack.
Yeah, missed opportunities for Williams, but again, a lot of really positive things that you do see on film for him. Let's move on to the next player, Zach. Let's talk a little bit of Omar Cooper. We're heading to Bloomington, Indiana. And excuse me, let me rephrase. Omar Cooper Jr., national champion wide receiver out of Indiana. 6 feet, 199 pounds, out of Indianapolis, Indiana, Zach. And when we're looking at Omar Cooper, we've got some fun details on his upbringing. He obviously in high school, and you just talked about playing multiple sports. Obviously, he excelled as a 3-sport athlete: football, basketball, and track, where he performed in the long jump. Was a quarterback in his youth, and then transitioned to wide receiver in high school. Time goes on, becomes a 4-star recruit, commits to Indiana. And we know that those first couple of years for Indiana, they were one of the, if not the worst, Power 5 program in the country. Curt Cignetti comes in, injects a whole bunch of life and some NIL dollars into the program, and things get jumping. And from there, we're looking at a guy who went from, in 2024, Curt Cignetti's first season and a really successful year for Indiana, for 28 catches, 594 yards, and 7 touchdowns, in which he actually led the Big Ten in yards per reception that year. He blew up something fierce in 2025, where he was number 5 in the Big Ten in receptions with 69, and number 4 in the Big Ten in receiving yards with 937. Again, 69 catches, 937 yards, 13 touchdowns for an offense led by Fernando Mendoza. And while not necessarily, or I would say often, sharing the limelight with Sage Sarratt, you actually could argue, and depending upon how you have these things, he didn't come out this year, but you can probably argue who those top 3 were in what particular order in terms of the wide receivers. I am supremely excited for the guy who's not coming out quite yet, Charlie Becker. But that's besides the point, Zach. We're here to talk about Omar Cooper Jr. What say you, sir?
Indiana University has captured 24 NCAA championships, 5 in men's basketball, 8 by their soccer team, 6 straight in swimming and diving, 3 cross-country titles, and 1 each in wrestling and outdoor track. This puts them tied with Princeton for 27th most championships overall. The 2025 college football playoff championship doesn't count toward the Hoosiers' total of NCAA titles, but it's not terrible hardware to have. And Omar Cooper's 5 catches for 71 yards helped propel them to that victory. Versatility as a receiver is incredibly valuable.
Yes.
And Omar Cooper can beat zone coverages by picking apart those soft spots and presenting his quarterback a target. He really does a good job with those diagonal throwing lanes and sitting down in them. And he can decimate man coverage with tactical cuts at the stem of post and slant routes. He's really good at setting up defenders. The ball seems to stick in his hands at the catch point. Cooper hauls in balls through contact because of that constant, consistent extension and his soft hands. And once he has the ball, I think he's very, very intelligent with it. He picks his way through defenses to tack on those extra yards. He's not necessarily fast, but man, he's got great vision, takes great angles, and he's also an asset in the run game where Cooper routinely blows up corners at the edge to spring his running back for chunk runs. That was one of the things when I was watching the two running backs from Indiana. Often I would go back and see who set that screen, and a lot of the time it was Omar Cooper on the edge.
Another player, Zach, that we're looking at operating primarily out of the slot. Contact balance is that of a running back. Basically, what Omar Cooper is able to do. The run after catch ability is strong because he's consistently lowering his shoulders, absorbing contact, and contorting his body to be able to churn out those extra yards, like you had already mentioned. And another thing that I had also mentioned here, hey, his run after catch IQ is high. He's consistently using the defender's leverages against them in that respect as well.
And the interesting piece of that, too, is I don't think Fernando Mendoza does his receivers a lot of favors with where he puts the ball in regard to yards after catch. Like, I think he's pretty accurate to the body, but I don't think he's necessarily always accurate. So a lot of this is on Omar Cooper adding yards.
Yeah. That's actually a really, really valid point there. I feel like that goes back to the Mac Jones corollary when we look back. I remember he's one that we talk about a lot with that. I do also like the fact that he's able to separate from defenders vertically and horizontally with speed. I like the fact that while not necessarily always the quickest, his top speed, whatever he's able to get up to, he's able to close cushion. He's able to create vertical separation and also across the field when we think through deep overs, drags, digs, things of that nature. Quickly eats up cushion, and I really like that in his repertoire. And I think that some of the spectacular catches outside of his frame are just nuts. And it's similar to the Jordan Tyson when we talked about him last week. The things that you see when navigating his ability to either go up and get it or the body control to be able to turn, flip hips, whatever needs to happen. The spectacular pieces are really fun to be able to see from him. Obviously, we're talking a guy that was a late bloomer when it comes to performance and didn't really do anything until this final season, Zach. So what might have been holding him back to getting to that point?
So being such an adept run blocker does have a downside because Cooper was used a ton as a blocker because he's so effective at it. And anytime he's setting the edge for a running back, that's a play where he's not getting a target. Although he's also really good at releasing off the line of scrimmage cleanly, I think Cooper can be bothered with physicality in route. So like he's good at the release, but if a corner can get his hands on Cooper in route, things happen sometimes. And it happens most often when Cooper actually initiates the contact and then he's unable to re-break it with that move at the stem. And sometimes Cooper is a half beat slow coming open, which means that his quarterback shifts to his next read before Cooper is separated. But that also has a little bit to do. Mendoza is very quick going through progression. And so, like, you have to be open or he's on to the next. There are players who simply translate to the next level. And I think Omar Cooper Jr. feels like he fits that mold. He's versatile enough to line up outside. He plays in the slot. He can win versus man. He can win versus zone. I think he can play the lead or succeed as a supporting role. Cooper isn't necessarily an elite wide receiver, but man, I think there's more success coming in his future. And he's a player that I'm going to be targeting in rookie drafts.
Yeah, big Omar Cooper Jr. fan when thinking through what he's been able to do or put on film this year. Same thing that I had here for him is Zach. Him consistently, or not consistently, that's not fair to say. He can be bothered with physicality within his actual route. And I don't think that he's particularly sudden coming out of his breaks or regarding shiftiness, even with the ball in hand. Yeah. There are flashes where he's able to be quick in terms of making a decision if a defender's coming up on him pretty quickly, but usually that's from a stationary space, not so much when he's actually already running and making his way up the field and maximizing in that sense. I do think several times I'm left wanting more simply because we see him break off chunk gains. And I think that for all the things that he does well, I simply just wanted more game breaker things, not just the deep targets, because he does a good job of being able to bring those in. But from a standpoint of as much as he gets from a short to intermediate standpoint, I would have wanted to see him do more than simply be a chunk gainer in that sense. But again, we're talking about a player who's doing quite well for himself after the season, for sure. Next up, we're not going far. We're staying right there in the same locker room. Elijah Sarratt, the senior out of Indiana. You talk about a guy who's transferred and been around a little bit. Elijah Sarratt actually began as a 0-star recruit, Zach. Zero. Nada. It's not any. He rose through the FCS at St. Francis in Pennsylvania. He was a freshman All-American there, actually. He earned first-team All-NEC honors with 42 catches and 700 yards, 13 touchdowns. Really good job, obviously, that he was doing there in 2022. Then he transfers to James Madison, where, of course, if you've heard that name before, yes, that's where Curt Cignetti actually coached prior to his time at Indiana over the last 2 seasons. But in 2023, this guy went off. 82 catches, 1,191 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Curt Cignetti said, hey, you're coming with me to Indiana because we're going to continue to do awesome things. And from there, he had 2 seasons of really just getting stuff done. Over 1,700 yards over 2 seasons. And then this final season where really things were put all together for him, 65 catches, 830 yards. That's good for 12.8 a catch. 15 touchdowns, Zach. Mm-hmm. He actually led the entire NCAA with those 15 receiving touchdowns. Number 6 in the Big Ten, number 6 in the Big Ten in receptions, number 9 in the Big Ten in receiving yards. The guy has simply been getting it done these last few seasons. And I think we see why he was the headliner coming into the season and obviously had to share the stage with Omar Cooper's emergence, but Sarratt's a good player on his own, Zach.
Yeah. I've got a quick English lesson before we delve into Elijah Sarratt.
Okay, is this you putting your degree to work or what are we doing?
I mean, a little bit.
Okay.
Both my parents were English teachers too, so I come by it honestly. But the letter A is not the letter U. That seems pretty simple, yeah? So building off that, we can infer that Elijah Sarratt with an A is not remotely related to Sage or Chaz Surratt, both spelled with a U. However, Elijah Sarratt and his 15 receiving touchdowns is closely related to Indiana University winning that national championship in 2025. Sarratt has the frame to be a bully, and you see it often when he run blocks on the edge. He's also willing to explode off the line of scrimmage even when he's being deployed as a decoy, which seems like a small thing, but attention to details like that is paramount to making it in the NFL and really something that I love to see, because a player who is willing to do that is willing to figure out the little things he needs to do to succeed. Sarratt has very strong hands, as he's exceptional at tracking and making plays, both on those back shoulder throws through contact, and also on the sideline, high point situations. Although Sarratt is not necessarily a dynamic route runner, I think he's a good one. He picks holes in zones to sit in, and he seems to have a plan of attack even before he catches the ball. And that instinct plus his quick transition to a runner allows him to add extra yards. So he's not necessarily fast, but man, he does a good job assessing what's behind him and catching and turning and getting upfield.
I think a man who knows his limitations.
Yeah.
Right. He's not waiting around. But also I think it speaks to his IQ. So it's really strong stuff there. A guy who's primarily lining up in the boundary or as an outside wide receiver. And I think that some of the ways that he primarily wins, his footwork, his precision, and his ability to cut, even while not being the quickest or necessarily the fastest, he is a very deliberate mover. And I think that those things allow him to run routes in such a way that specifically short to intermediate allow him to be able to get advantage of, more often than not, quicker defensive backs. And I also think that he's really physical in route and at the catch point. So he's not often, and I think one of the juxtapositions, if I'm even using that word correctly, I need to make sure that I'm checking myself on verbiage. I have to remember, Zach, you are. This is what you do. The thing that I often go back and look at between him and Cooper, which unfortunately it's just something that happens when you watch them back to back. He really does a good job of having varied releases and leveraging moves in route and manipulating defenders within the actual route with a level of nuance that Cooper simply doesn't. And this isn't about Cooper right now. But when I think about that with Sarratt, it's like, oh, these are ways that he wins. And he's a really cerebral player in that sense. He's good for a slight push off at the top of the route to be able to create a little bit of extra separation because another thing that you can probably call him is hip pocket. We'll get to that here in a minute. But that little push off gives him just enough of what he needs. Similar to Cooper, contact balance as a runner is really strong, and he's able to absorb contact and keep going while not necessarily dynamic in that sense. Strong, for sure, when it comes to his frame. And I really like the work that he's able to do against the sidelines. And you already mentioned the ball tracking, which I think is actually great from him, his ability to just track the football, especially deep, back shoulder, things of that nature. But give us the good, Zach. We've gotten a lot of positive things that we've said about Sarratt, but we've also alluded to a fair amount of things that don't look so great.
Yeah, because Elijah Sarratt isn't functionally fast, I think cover corners get their hands on him far too often. And sometimes, like, Sarratt even initiates this contact trying to out bully, out physical defenders. While he probably has the strength to win this way, I don't think he has the technique to release himself once he's gotten tied up with a cornerback. And so, yeah, you talked about that little push off separation. But if he's contacting a defender throughout the route, I think it's a lot harder for him to do that. And I think Sarratt doesn't have the speed to take the top off defenses, so he has to settle for winning at the catch point on deeper throws. So you're not getting the over the top deep ball touchdown, 70-yard, everybody cheers, line up and fire the muskets in Foxborough. Like that's not happening. It's tough to overlook one of the key pieces of a championship offense, especially when Sarratt put up consistently impressive numbers over all three of his collegiate seasons, and you shouldn't overlook him, but understand that he's probably a touchdown-dependent possession receiver with that wide receiver 2 potential. So drafting him is likely to be more risky. One final English lesson for you. Cacoethes is an irrational but irresistible motive for doing something.
These nuggets, Zach. These nuggets. Good stuff there. We are 3 players down, Zach, 3 to go. And let me ask you this. Not to spoil what we'll talk through, but I think with the 3 guys that we've watched this point, I think this is a really good point to take a look or to be able to give a peek into your musing today and really highlight exactly what you were talking about earlier about the very different wide receiver archetypes.
Yeah, so I'm looking for players to drive targets. Like, I think that's the easiest way to find fantasy points. It's the most reliable, most consistent way to find fantasy points. Like, touchdowns are great. You get 6 points for them, but they're not necessarily sticky year over year unless you're Devontae Adams. And so I would much rather try to identify players that I think separate and drive targets. And so when we're talking through Omar Cooper, Antonia Williams, and Elijah Sarratt, I think that's the order that I have them in for fantasy. And that's how I evaluate. So I'm not trying to tell you who's going to be great for your NFL team. And I think that's also important. We talked through this a little bit on the Optimus Primer. We're not trying to GM an NFL team. We're not. I'm trying to draft the best players I can for my 4 to 5 dynasty teams right now. And I'm trying to give you, the listener, that similar advantage. And I think it is an advantage. And so somebody like Omar Cooper, where he gets open at all levels of the field and creates that horizontal separation often, can make the back shoulder throw, plays on back shoulder throws and covered plays, but also creates enough separation so you can have a see him open, throw it quarterback be successful. And then Antonia Williams is he's a separator. He's a horizontal separator. He's not going to be a vertical separator. So, again, driving a lot of easy targets. And then Sarratt is more of closely akin to the X receiver. I don't think he's like strictly that. I don't think he's a Mike Evans or, pick your poison for an X, although Mike Evans is the one I always go back to now. I think he's closer akin to that than he is to somebody versatile enough to slide inside, create separation with quickness and horizontal separation.
Yep. I'm right there with you. And then I just thought, and it just hit me as we were talking, it's just a really clear picture of what you talked about with that. And I think it's also really for the first 3 guys that we talked about on last week's episode as well, when we think through Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson, 3 very different receivers, very different skill sets, how they're going to win and what they do to win, all very different. So I really think it's just an astute point and really important, the dialogue obviously that you have with Tommy, but that this group fleshes that out very clearly. And I hope that you all as the listeners are able to pull these things out as well. All right. Last 3, Zach. Well, I'm going to kick it into gear a little bit. I'll try to talk a little bit less as we're getting low on time already. We're having way too much fun here.
Should I read on 1.5 speed?
Absolutely not. This is where you keep doing what you're doing, and I'm going to dial it back. Zachariah Branch Jr. out of Georgia. Zachariah Branch Jr. out of Georgia. Junior being his class, not at the end of his name. Transferred from USC. And when we look at the life and times of Zachariah Branch, he actually went to the world famous Bishop Gorman High School, 5-star recruit out of high school, highly lauded as like the guy. You saw him in the AJ Green TV things on YouTube, really huge superstar. Yeah, actually, when we think through his career as a freshman at USC, He actually won the Johnny the Jet Rogers Award as the nation's top return man. He was number 1 in college football for punt return yards per return, and number 2 in punt return yards, period. At 5'9", 177, hailing from Las Vegas, Nevada, you'd think that being that small and that good and having that much juice coming out of that West Coast feel, you'd think he would have set the world on fire being paired with Lincoln Riley at USC and all those things. First 2 seasons were pretty lackluster. They couldn't get the quarterback situation all the way squared away for USC. Zachariah Branch didn't necessarily find his footing when it came to consistent production on a week-to-week, game-to-game basis, and he only had 3 touchdowns over his first 2 seasons at USC. Fast forward, he transfers to Georgia. Georgia decides, you know what? We're going to throw you the ball a lot with a very small ADOT, but you, sir, are going to catch the ball a good bit. 81 receptions, which led the SEC in 2025. 811 yards. Yes, for all you math nerds, that is approximately 10 yards per catch. 6 touchdowns, Zach. Finally getting an opportunity to at least touch the ball on a consistent basis. Was it varied? I'll let you be the judge here, sir. What do you have to say about it?
I think you're going to have to get over your tachophobia because, sure, traditionally a healthy fear of speed has served you well around draft time. It allowed you to avoid John Ross. It allowed you to avoid Tyquan Thornton, Henry Ruggs, and even that single solitary tear rolling down my cheek, Xavier Worthy. But the failure of some of these past burners is not the fault of being fast. It's that speed was sometimes their only weapon. So when you hear Zachariah Branch was the Nevada Track and Field High School Gatorade Player of the Year as a sophomore in 2021, don't be afraid because he is far more than his 4.35 40 time. Branch is a slot receiver. He was a slot receiver at USC. He was a slot receiver at Georgia. He will be a slot receiver in the NFL, but that does not mean that he needs to be schemed for to get him open from the slot. Branch can win on slants and digs and hitches and outs. It's not a tremendously diverse route tree, but he can win on those in-breaking, out-breaking routes, as well as being utilized in the flat, on screens, and in motion. He has fantastic hands, usually making plays away from his body, which actually allows him to be exceptional in traffic and through contact, which is something really unexpected for a player of his size. Branch is also both quick in route and fast, and that allows him to create space and then run away from defenders. And you saw this a lot. If he catches the ball in space, he can get an angle, and then there is no chance for a defender to catch him. And he also sees the field very well with the ball in his hands, uses that vision to run to space. And again, there were so many times when he would catch the ball, on a screen or catch the ball on a slant, and like a little 7-yard slant, and you could see his eyes light up. You could see him go, "Yep, there's space. I'm gone."
And this just keeps going back to how disappointed I am in Georgia. The opportunity was there for him to have and be leveraged in so many more fun ways than for whatever percentage of his targets to simply be screens. We're watching him run just butt naked open across the field often, and for him to not get the ball and show off more was just a miscarriage of justice, I think, and it bothers me. Similar to you, Zach, I think the thing that's most jarring about how good he is or what he does really well, he's nails in traffic, man. He is nails in traffic, and you don't expect that from a guy 5'9", sub 180. That's not something that you even should think, but he is. And he has a very clear understanding, at least for me, when it comes to specifically running horizontally across the field, understanding the zones, understanding the depths within the zone to be able to break and find space when he's crossing past to create levels. Again, they did not hit him on those opportunities. And it's one of those weird things where when people talk about driving targets, yes, he got a lot, but man, he could have done so much more and just was robbed of the opportunity. And it bothers me. Sorry. Gotta get that out of the way. Weaknesses, Zach. Obviously, Zach Branch, second to last player that we're talking about on day 2. What do you have of some of his drawbacks?
So I think maybe the most interesting flaw of Branch's might be his inability to win over the top in spite of his straight line speed.
Yep.
I think he slows down to track the ball, and that allows defenders to close that separation gap. And because he's not really a contested catch winner, like he's great in traffic. So he's great when a defender, like he's between the ball and the defender hits him and he makes the catch. He's fantastic at that. If he has to go up and battle a defender in a high point situation, I think he tends to lose those battles more often than physical defenders. When he's attacking zone coverages at the second level, I think Branch has a tendency to push too far to utilize his speed. And so there's like a sweet spot in between that first level of defense and then the safeties, where if you sit down, you're open, but if you continue on, you're covered again by that safety. And I think he pushes too much into that cushion. As dynamic as Branch is with the ball in his hands, he will have stretches where there is too much bouncing and not enough go after the catch. So he'll sit there and like try to juke a guy 15 times. And it's like, you got a whole bunch of space over there to your right. Just get there. Speed kills, and speed for speed's sake kills NFL careers. Fortunately, I think Zachariah Branch doesn't solely rely on his speed. His skill set as a returner and as a receiver, both behind the line of scrimmage and on the short and intermediate routes, should be an immediate fit for any NFL team. The Giants should draft him now. He ought to drive enough targets to be interesting for fantasy, with potential for Branch to be a really dynamic player out of the slot.
And Zach, I don't want to go down another rabbit hole necessarily, unless you just feel the need to want to talk about it. But he is a player that, for me, it made really difficult for me to give a grade for his run after catch.
Yeah.
Because there are pieces of his run after catch that are off the charts. And there were some things that you highlighted, obviously, as his weaknesses, where why is it taking you so long to go? Why is it that the first person that typically gets their hands on you brings you down? While strong in terms of in traffic, not necessarily that being the case ball in hand. So I really don't even know how to fully say what I'm thinking, but I do think that some of his skills create a really strange cocktail formula, if you will, when thinking through how to grade his run after catch. Because I think that for me, exactly with what you said, his vertical fight, post-up ability, it's not something that we see.
Right.
And that grade's really low. If that was even average for me, and if I could really nail down how I felt about his release or his sideline work, which we don't really see much of, I think that I'd have him graded higher.
Yeah.
Because I like him. My final grade doesn't necessarily say that my final film grade doesn't say that I like him as much as I actually like him. He's an enigma.
And that's such a funny piece of film grades, and I think it's one of the flaws in it, because in order to do justice to these players, you'd have to have sometimes 15, 20, 25, 30 different categories.
Yeah.
But but then parsing that out, you're navel gazing. So like to combine things and try to do as best you can, sometimes it leaves these conundrums with players like Branch. I'm with you, like lockstep with you.
Yeah. All right, let's finish up here, Zach. Here we are, 2 players left. Excuse me, I think I shortchanged one of the players. We're actually coming up on, spoiler alert, one of my favorites in this entire class, in Germie Bernard, wide receiver out of Alabama. Germie Bernard actually began his collegiate career at Michigan State, then transferred to Washington, then spent 2 seasons at Alabama. Lots of change for Germie Bernard over that time. Not getting much burn as a freshman at Michigan State. Then obviously playing on that Washington team where we've highlighted before. Players, this is the same room as the Denzel Boston, the Jalen Polk, the Jalen McMillan, and obviously Rome Odunze, whom name just slipped for me there. 6'1", 206. And when we're looking at Germie Bernard, he was actually number 6 in the SEC in receptions with 64 catches this past season, and number 7 in reception yards, 862, and number 5 in reception touchdowns. 64 catches, 862 yards, 7 touchdowns. He also had 18 rushing attempts for 101 yards and 2 scores. Germie Bernard, not someone that many people have said much about throughout this entire draft season. Not the most explosive, not the craziest athlete, not a part of the lineage of just wild, absurd records of the game out of Alabama passing games. Germie Bernard, Zach, he had to taken a while to be able to find his way, but he found his way in an inconsistent offense, but a team that needed him this season when the freshman phenom, who then turned to sophomore Ryan Williams, wasn't really anywhere to be found in many instances. So again, we've got more enigmas here, Zach. What do you have on Germie Bernard?
Roughly 5 babies a year are born named Germie. In fact, you would need to know over 404,000 people to expect to know one Germie. But lucky for us, fresh off the back-to-back seasons leading Alabama in receptions, Germie Bernard is about to enter our lives. Although Bernard measured at 6'1" and 206 pounds at the combine, I think he plays a little bit smaller and a little bit quicker than that size. On straight line routes like hitches and flies, man, I love the way Bernard sinks his hips. He creates separation with that really quick direction change. After the catch, he transitions very quickly to a ball carrier and is looking to add those extra yards, something you love to see. The players who can add extra yards are not necessarily always relying on their quarterback to get those for them. Bernard moves like a running back with the ball in his hand. He uses contact balance and cutting to gain extra real estate. And defenders on the edge hate to see Bernard coming because he is never afraid to stick his nose in it as a blocker.
Full stop, Zach. Full stop. My favorite so far to watch after catch in the class for me. This is something that you and I tend to look for really often. I wasn't expecting it with Germie Bernard, but I think there are some of the things that I saw a little bit differently than you, and I'm excited to be able to parse through that in my mind and go back and probably watch some, because I do have one rewatch that I told a friend of mine that I would do because they didn't like what I had to say about someone from last week, and I want to get to that here soon. But I do think, at least for me, a guy who is able to play out of the slot, he's able to play outside in motion. They manufacture touches for him. I love that he can win in those multiple alignments, and I think that his acceleration and how quickly he is in terms of getting into his routes and being able to threaten defensive backs, specifically vertically, is something that I'm a very big fan of. I think that he's dangerous after the catch. I think that he has, and as you said, in terms of people not wanting to see him coming, I think he's versatile in that he's able to break tackles with his physicality, accelerating through contact, turning short throws into those chunk plays. And even before that, though, and I think I buried the lead, one of my favorite pieces is I like some of his refinement within his actual route. And some of the things that I mentioned about Sarratt can also be said for Bernard in terms of leveraging speed difference and variation in the route to manipulate the defender.
Pace,
I
yeah.
actually, and I actually think far more often than not, for what I was able to see, I think that he plays bigger than his size. I saw the 6'1", and I didn't know necessarily what to expect, but when I saw that, I was like, man, I could see him. I think he moves like a smaller person, but I think that sometimes he has the play style wise as a bigger receiver. So he's someone that I am very intrigued on Germie Bernard. I'm just gonna say that. But talk to me, Zach, about some of the places where you might see some red flags.
So I think most of Germie Bernard's exploits come in the middle of the field. His play on the boundaries is limited by his lack of ability to win through contact at the catch point. And against zone coverages, I think that Bernard sometimes has a bad habit of drifting from openings. It's almost like we're caught in the tractor beam, and he drifts from openings and kind of gets caught in a defender's orbit, and then is content to sit there. At the stem of routes against man defenses, I think Bernard struggles some with a lack of quickness. Most of his dynamic speed and directional changes are in a straight line. So, when he's doing the outbreak or a drag or something like that, like I think that's where his lateral quickness shows up as a little bit of a flaw. And I think that this can lead to a lack of separation on outs, digs, slants, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I really do think Bernard is a talented receiver, but it also seems to me like he leaves his wide receiver one status behind him at Alabama.
Yep.
Nothing he does is reminiscent of, the alpha, which is not really a thing. I can hear Peter Howard screaming. But I do think that as a team's secondary option, Bernard can really benefit. He can do that, like be a 1 from a 2. Seeing targets as a possession receiver over the middle of the field and making plays after the catch. So again, a really intriguing player, a player that I enjoyed watching. I know you and I both, we had a little bit of conversation about Germie Bernard when we were watching, and I was not expecting this, which is pleasant in a class where we're down on.
Yeah, not expecting is, I think it's putting that lightly for sure. I do think that I don't want to keep invoking this name. I think about just Romeo Dobbs, and not that they play the same. I want to be clear, people. But I think about someone who is just a do everything versus like having a clear archetype. Like I think that some of the things that we've talked about with players today prior to him, jack of many trades, not necessarily master of any. I do think that his hands can be inconsistent, especially when it comes to contested catch situations. I also think that from a standpoint of the physicality that he shows as a runner, I don't know that always shows in terms of him sometimes being rerouted. And so it's weird because I think that being a strong player with ball in hand, but not strong in your route consistently is just an awkward thing to come to grips with. But similar to you, Zach, wide receiver one, no, I don't know that I see that. But as a really good two in an offense and someone who is a dependable chain mover specifically,
Yeah.
I like his prospects to be that. Okay, now we're actually at the final player of the evening. Chris Brazzell II. Unfortunately, we have to talk about Tennessee players because they keep putting players, wide receivers and running backs into the NFL. So here I am against my will to talk about a volunteer. But you can't say I'm not being fair. Can't say I'm not being balanced. Chris Brazzell. We're looking at a player who is 6'4", 198 pounds out of Midland, Texas. He actually began his collegiate career at Tulane. And at Tulane, not a ton of craziness going on in those first two seasons, 2022 and 2023. But transfers to Tennessee. And even in his first season at Tennessee, not anything shaken. And again, we're looking at a guy who's having to share time with other talented wide receivers down there. But this final season is when he finally put it all together. 62 catches, 1,017 yards, which was second in the SEC. Good for 9 touchdowns, which actually led the SEC in receiving touchdowns. Chris Brazzell, someone that I think that people are actually pretty excited about, especially when we think about the spectrum of Tennessee wide receivers that we've seen over the last couple of years and their varying levels of disappointment, I should say. putting that lightly. I think that's fair. Jalen Hyatt lovers. I think that's fair. Zach, I won't go any further. Let me just stop. The floor is yours, sir.
I mean, he's certainly, if we go by height, he's definitely up there. But tall ain't all. It's a pretty nice head start, though. There are athletes who bend your mind with what they're able to do at the size they're able to do it at. Kevin Durant catching the ball on the wing, taking that rhythm dribble, and then swooping up into the smoothest jumper ever. Aaron Judge dwarfing the catcher, shading out the strike zone before driving a ball 475 feet, although not this week. And Chris Brazzell's 6'4" frame exploding off the line of scrimmage past the corner and over the top of the defense. It just doesn't look possible. Brazzell is a space eater. He chews up cushion with his long strides. His length makes his speed deceptive. I think defenders are often beaten before they realize that he's gotten behind them because it doesn't look like he's moving fast. And then, man, he's gone. Brazzell can be deadly in that straight line. Even if he's working underneath, he does a really exceptional job, again, sinking his hips and changing directions on curls and hitches. And he utilizes those when cushion dictates that there needs to be a shorter route. So he's really good at reading that cushion, eating the cushion when the defender is close, and taking what the defender gives him when they play off, respecting that speed.
Yeah, we're looking at a guy who at the combine ran a 4.37.
Yeah.
6'4" frame. Just like you said, Zach, that cushion is gone. when people think they have space, they do not have space when it comes to him. I really like his ability to be able to get up to speed and get going. I actually think that his downfield ball tracking, his ability to track the ball down the field, is positive. I think that he does a good job of stacking corners. I think he does a good job of really going up to be able to make plays in the air. I think it's one of probably his calling cards for him as a player. And I even think that he does a good job of body control when thinking through staying balanced and being able to go up and make a play on the ball at that height. Plenty of things that I'm not necessarily thrilled about, but those pieces, like those are the things that I think that can allow you, if we look up a few years from now and he stuck around and made a name for himself, it's those are the things that he's done to really differentiate and be a big playmaker for an offense, which could obviously lead to some really positive things for him. But again, Zach, he's the last of the 12 that we've talked about today. So let's finish up some of the things that maybe we did not like about this game.
There is not a lot of mystery in Brazzell's game. However, not only is he mostly a straight line separator, it's also easy to tell when the ball is not coming his way because he is entirely disinterested in the play. He's not going to block. He's not going to run. He just like, it's cool. You guys do your thing. I'll be over here when you're ready to go for the next one. When he's confronted by physical man coverage, Brazzell has a bad habit of giving up his intended route and allowing himself to be pushed wide. And it's often to the outside. Even if he's not being pushed around, I think sometimes he bails on routes, stopping rather than continuing to work to try to get open if early separation doesn't happen. And Brazzell's length should be a huge weapon for him. Yet I think he continues to let the ball travel in on his body at the catch point rather than extending his hands to meet it. And this is especially in traffic. He's okay at high point stuff, but man, he's letting the ball get in on his chest. He's letting defenders get their hands in on it. His speed score is going to be incredibly impressive. Chris Brazzell's highlights are spectacular at times, but I think that there is a lot more sizzle than substance here. Limited by that lack of lateral quickness, Brazzell probably becomes a taller field stretcher at the next level, which means game-to-game consistency for fantasy probably won't be there, even if the NFL takes an early shot at scoring a giant target. Tall ain't all.
Yeah. And that lack of lateral agility, Zach, that you were referring to, I think that also shows in his inability to really do anything from a yak perspective, or the yards after the catch, or even his run after catch ability. And I also think that with his frame, he's able to be rerouted quite a bit. I don't know that he plays with a good bit of leverage in his actual route. So few other things that I could say. I'm not going to pile on to him, but again, I think that some of the flashes that we see are fun, and I'm curious to see if he is only that, or if there's something along the lines of being someone who's going to consistently develop into something more, even though he's had 4 years in college. So this will be interesting to see. All right, Zach, time everyone's waited for. It's time to be able to order these 6 players that we've talked about when we're thinking about our film grades. For those who may be new to the program, please remember what Zach and I are sharing now are how we've graded these players based off of the film that we've watched of these players. We've watched anywhere between 8 to upwards of 15 games of some of these players, and I know Zach sometimes will try to sprinkle in even more if he's trying to get some better context on some certain things. So we've done some work in terms of being able to watch these players and not simply highlights. We want to give you all a very comprehensive look at our process, what we see, and allow that to ideally be something that aids you in your process for you to continue to make awesome decisions for your dynasty teams, for your fantasy teams, and even just for the fun of it, if that's what you're into it for as well. But Zach, let's talk about these 6 players. Then we'll open up the scope to the 12 players total from last week and this week. Should be fun to see how we have things stacked. Where do you have it?
So for the 6 today, I've got Omar Cooper Jr. as the clear one. Then I've got Zachariah Branch. I've got Antonia Williams and Germie Bernard all in kind of a group, which is an interesting, fun target driving yards after catch kind of thing going on. Then Elijah Sarratt. Then Chris Brazzell. And so if we're going to talk all 12, it's a man, this is a weird class. It's a really tight grouping. Like if we were patterning a shotgun, we'd be really happy with this. Like things are all right there in a mass. So I've got Cooper and Carnell Tate and Jordan Tyson and Chris Bell in that top group. I don't have too much to choose between them. Carnell Tate and Omar Cooper actually graded out exactly the same at 1. I think I lean toward Omar Cooper the way he wins, but I also don't think you're going to need to draft him up there. So it's one of those things where like our film grades aren't necessarily our draft rankings. So be smart about how things come out with the NFL draft and then the way ADP shakes out, because there's a chance you're going to get a player like Cooper, a player like Chris Bell toward the back of the first, maybe even in the early second. I don't know, because there are going to be people who push tight ends up into the first round. Obviously, they haven't listened to this show before. But Cooper, Carnell Tate, Tyson, and Bell are in my first tier. My second tier is Branch, Mekhi Lemon, Antonia Williams, and Germie Bernard. Really dig that group. It's a little slotty. It's kind of how I like it. Then there's a tier break. I have Elijah Sarratt in his own group. And then we get into some players that I'm a little bit less likely to roster, with Denzel Boston and Chris Brazzell. And then a tier break and KC Concepcion. Is that the player that you've been asked to go back and watch?
Concepcion is the player that I've been told to go back and watch. And the thing that I was challenged with, Zach, and first of all, thank you for sharing your list there. The thing that I was challenged with is that I was told that if I was as excited as I was about Zachariah Branch and the things that I saw in Zachariah Branch, not necessarily that Concepcion does all of these things necessarily better, but I keep being told he does more, like much more.
He gets schemed for so much.
Yeah, and so I don't.
And
I guess
look, if you want to talk punt returners, yeah, they're pretty even. Like I'm with you, but I don't want to talk punt returners.
So I told my friend, I said I will give it a fair look back. We're coming up on the catch-all show soon, within the next couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, and at some point I will have a re-roll of KC Concepcion, and we'll see how different it is. With that said, the 6 that I have currently for today, Omar Cooper Jr. leads the way. Only 1 point behind him, I actually have Germie Bernard. So they're kind of in this little interesting group. But as you said, tightly packed when we're thinking, I think for me, my top 2, really, everything it just slots in really cleanly for me. I'll say that. My number 3 in this group, film grade wise, and this is again where we're looking really tight, like 0.5 between a couple of these grades. Elijah Sarratt, then Antonia Williams out of Clemson, Zachariah Branch out of Georgia, and Chris Brazzell. He's further down. He is not part of that tightly packed area, to be clear. So top to bottom right now, the 3 that I have up top, Carnell Tate is in a tier of his own. Mekhi Lemon, I think, is, for me, film grade wise, is in a tier of his own. And to be clear, my favorite watch of those 3 is Jordan Tyson, who I have 3rd.
Yeah.
Jordan Tyson's my favorite watch. I wouldn't be surprised if Jordan Tyson is the best when we look up in a couple of years. But film grade wise, that's how I have those 3. Slight, literally 0.5 off Omar Cooper Jr. and Germie Bernard, right behind Jordan Tyson. Then we have the likes of the 3 guys actually that we talked about last week: Chris Bell, Denzel Boston, KC Concepcion for me. Then the 4 that I mentioned up today: Sarratt, Williams, Branch, and then Brazzell way down the way. Um, I'm really intrigued by this group, to be clear. I wasn't expecting it. Wasn't
it's
expecting it.
it's always fun for me to get a class where things are so close and things are not obvious.
Yes.
So sometimes you get a class where like the top tier is close, but it's obvious. So they're pushed up regardless. So it was kind of like the Addison and JSN like those two are obviously the top wide receivers. There was no question. And this group, it's really tough to me to figure out where the separation is,
Yeah.
because there's a really flat group. I don't think that there's not an easily identifiable. There's no player that like jumps off the page like Justin Jefferson did. There's no player that jumps off the page like an AJ Brown did. It really feels a lot like 2022, where there are a lot of players that I really like. There are players that I like that other people don't necessarily love. And so it makes me happy because I'll be able to get them late. But there's also like, you're going to have to pay up for Tate. You're going to have to pay up for Jordan Tyson. You're going to have to pay up for Mekhi Lemon. I'm not upset about that. Like it just is one of those classes where, man, the top tier and that second tier for me even are really close. There's nobody that separates themselves out. And so it's a fun class, and it'll be a fun draft, because I think that when you have classes that we consider down, and it's often a down class where you get this situation, the ADP is all over the place. You go into one draft and somebody will love Chris Bell, and so he'll go third overall. And then you'll go into the next draft and nobody will like Chris Bell, and he'll fall to like 202. And this is going to be how this class is. I think, I don't believe that there will be an overwhelming consensus for this group and wide receivers, running back, like the entire draft class. I don't believe there's going to be an overall consensus. And so it's a down class with some good players, but man, that makes it fun.
Yes. And especially for depending upon your dynasty stylings, right? What you prefer. I am one who likes to, in most instances, stack picks, even when they're later or less desirable. And I think this is the kind of class where I can get several of the players that I'm most interested in, even if they're not the top of the line guys. Because as we've mentioned, Omar Cooper Jr. is likely not going in the top half, top 3/4 of dynasty rookie drafts. Germie Bernard is not going to be a name. We've talked about how the tight ends are likely to go. We've got Mendoza, we've got Love, we've got the receivers that we've already talked about. I think there's opportunity for you to be able to get players that you like, period.
Yeah.
If there are players that you like in this draft, you'll be able to navigate these drafts to get players that you like and see how things shake out for yourself.
Yeah, but it also means it's a draft class where if you are passionate about a player, go get them, because you don't know where they're going to go.
Yep.
So it's not one where you can kind of sit back and be sure, because I think it's going to be all over the place.
Yep. Agreed. Zach, man, I'm excited that we've been able to do what we've done. It's been a real privilege, but we are not done. Do you want to lay out for the people what the next few weeks might look like for us?
So next week, we're attacking the quarterback position. Remains to be seen how many quarterbacks we'll talk through. I'm not sure that it will be worth talking through more than 2 or 3. Maybe we'll hit I don't know. At least one. We're going to talk at least one.
Talk more.
And tight end. So we combine the quarterback and tight end show. There will be a show, I promise. We will quarterback and tight end. The week after that is going to be tentative for me. I am traveling, and so it depends on when I get back from Atlanta whether or not there will be a show. So that's going to be April 2nd, I think, is going to be that. If I am back, we will do the first catch-all show. So we need your participation. Otherwise, JMic and I are just going to talk Nick Harbor, and that's going to be it. We're just, an hour and 20 minutes on Nick Harbor, and you get what you get. Maybe we'll throw in. Have we talked Jaden Ott yet? Maybe we'll throw in Ott. I don't know.
We did talk Jaden.
Okay, so we can't throw him in. But we'll do. I mean, if we have enough participation, if we have enough people you want to talk about, we can do a couple of cash-all shows. Like, I'm not above that. And also next week, we're going to be on with the Trade Addicts podcast. So you're going to get a double dose of JMic and I in your ears if you tune into that show, which you should, because Frank and Rocky are fantastic. And it's one of the shows that helped form and inform me as a dynasty player on the ins and outs of trading, which I will be honest, the early part of my dynasty playing, I was terrible. And I'm not great at it now, but I am tenfold better than I was before I got into the Trade Addict show. And so it'll be fun. Their family, so we'll get on there, chop it up. I'm sure we'll be talking some rookies because Matt will be interested in it and Rocky will tolerate it, and so that'll be fun. But yeah, so quarterbacks, tight ends next week. At least one catch-all, maybe two. We'll see what the timing looks like. My rookie film notes are soft launch live on the Dynasty on Fantasy Cares. So if you go to fantasycares.org and go to campaigns, my film notes are live. You can get them for a donation, and when you get them, you go to scottfishbowl.com, you log in, and then you click your campaigns, and it will show you that. And Scott has actually built me a space for my film notes on scottfishbowl.com, so you'll be able to read them right there. It's a really great accordion system where you click on the player, it accordions out, and you can read the write-up. I still need to edit them. We put them up earlier than I was anticipating, but I'm really happy that they're there, and what he has done on the back end of this, I think, is going to be fantastic for accessibility and viewability. So it's there on fantasycares.org /campaigns. And then, you can go find my rookie notes. There are other campaigns there too. So go donate. Like it's great. And man, shopfantasycares.com. The shirts are in. I don't know if you've seen that, but I've got like the Nintendo Fantasy Cares shirt. I've got the PlayStation Scott Fishbowl 16 shirt. I might have the Mario World Scott Fishbowl 16 shirt. I might have gone a little overboard with what we're doing, but they're fantastic. So we appreciate you as the community, both listening to us and also being so generous and so awesome with Fantasy Cares. But that's pretty much what I've got, JMic. I think JMic is at JMic Check. I am at Tacit Assassin 13. Fantasy Cares is at FantasyCares.org. The show is at Dynasty Dummies. And we really appreciate you rolling with us. We'll check you again next week for 45 minutes of Fernando Mendoza and like a couple of tight ends, something like that. But we appreciate you listening. This has been the Dynasty Dummies. Peace. I really should have.
Fernando.